Well, I came to United States 1985, and I didn't know exactly what I was going to do because I didn't know what to expect at all. I have never been outside my country. That was my first trip. So it took me a while to figure out, to go around and to see how I can fit in. And so all what I really thought is working for myself. Even though I was not educated in art, but I lived and touched art and danced music through it. And so, but I didn't have money. I went around, but I like fashion, so I ended up going to Saks Fifth Avenues and other department store. When I saw beautiful things which I couldn't afford, I thought I could make jewelry. And so that's how I started, jewelry designing. And it progressed in getting my jewelry into department stores like Saks Fifth Avenue stores, Barney's New York and Beverly Hills, and I sold through Takashimaya New York, Ultimo Chicago, Linda Dresner. So I have been in many other shops and stores. But before I started into collecting, at the same time I started collecting my own collection of art. But I expanded and participated in other tribal art shows and jewelry in Europe before I showed art in the United States. I have been showing my art and jewelry in Germany and France as well. So I've been featured in different magazines. I've been in Chronicle magazine, I've been Vogue magazine, Japan, Vogue magazine, America and Italy, but I was also featured in Architecture Digest. And so I have been able to accumulate clientele from different parts of the world.
Do you get a joy out of the expressions of the people that come in to look at your artwork?
I think people are the wonderful people. I mean, because you get to share, you get to know them in a very personal way, but more so, most of the people who come to my gallery, they're very curious, and also they have also visited other places, other art galleries or museums, but when they get to my place, they say there's a different feeling they feel when they walk into my gallery. And so that to me, it's a blessing.
Yeah, I was going to say, there seems to be symbolism in most of the artwork here. What kind of symbolism are you seeing here in this artwork?
There's one particular statue that took my breath away, whereas this African woman, I believe she stands at least 12, 16 feet tall, and her arms are stretched up.
Yes.
And they have two heads there. I mean, that is absolutely powerful. And so what I have found, and then the statues with the locks, which are at least 5 feet long in length, it seems to me. And the energy that came from that, it was just, it was so powerful. So when I saw these particular statues, I wanted to find out how far not only did they go back, but are we as African people connecting back home, African American people here, connecting back home with our arts and craft, because we rarely see anything of this magnitude. And it's really powerful. And so when I walked into the shop, my breath was taken away automatically.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, that symbolism that you talked about, the upstretched arms, what is that symbolic of?
Well, first of all, I have to say that's the piece almost everybody comes in, they have the same kind of feeling. And it has no race, no color, no education. Most people actually, your reaction was much better because I have had people really cry in front of it. I have a person who have fainted in front of it. I have a woman who came in when that piece was really back way in my gallery. She went there and stood there for almost 15 minutes, and I started worried. So I went and approached her, and she said, please don't feel that I am crazy if I ask you something stupid. And I said, no. And she said, have anybody told you that this piece moves? And I said, no, because normally I try to be just not suggest. And she said, you know, this piece moved me. It raised her hands like that and went back. And she said, I have never ever experienced that in my life, but I felt so much love, which I have never felt in my entire life. And I just said, wow. And she said, you know what? I am an orphan. I've been adopted. I don't know my mother. I don't know my parents, but that particular piece have showed me love more than any other person in my life.
You know, the whole aspect of fertility, the mother, the child, seems to be a theme through some of the artwork here. And so this is perhaps what this woman was feeling.
Well, because that particular piece to me is like a DNA. It's, I'm very grateful that now scientifically we came up with the word DNA, which has connected almost all of us in the world back to the motherland, regardless of race, color, and so what these people are feeling is the actual meaning of that piece. She is an ancestor. She's a medium actually, and she connects everybody to the ancestor. That meaning she will collect all of us to your great, great, great parents who have been deceased in the past. And so when you go through that, don't be shocked when you feel a certain, because that's how they connect and that's how they're touching you.
Yeah, I was going to say more, the ceremony of art, the sculpting, the wood, the brass, all of this is reaching back to the ancestors. And I just wanted to ask you, do you feel something connected back inside of you through your DNA?
Oh, automatically. Automatically. You cannot walk into an establishment of such and see the history without feeling something. I mean, when I walked in, I knew there was something, whatever that something is, that invisible energy.
The it factor,
Yeah, exactly, that you can automatically feel, and it touches you. So when Twiga was speaking about this young lady that came in and stood there for 15 minutes, I experienced part of that, you know, of standing there, not just only in awe, but the invisible energy that travels. And when you are connected to the universe, you will be able to connect with that feeling. And that's exactly what transpired with me.
Yeah, speak to me about the universe. I mean, have you been to Africa or to other parts of the world?
I haven't been to Africa itself. I've been there in spirit. As a matter of fact, I was saying to Twiga that I had applied for my Tanzanian citizenship back in '94 when I lived in Sydney, Australia, and very connected to the native people there. And we all are connected to that energy.
So you're saying that the people that live in Australia are connected to the African continent?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. As a matter of fact, I have a piece of art from a Corey gentleman I met in Melbourne when I was doing some work, and he drew on the back of this painting that I had gotten from him a lot of the African symbols. So it actually showed that there was this connection or this connectivity there, as well as connecting to Africa. So we are very connected, and we've traveled around this world. We've traveled all around this world.
Yes, so historically the diaspora predates the slavery that we're familiar with, and it goes back thousands of years perhaps.
Well, there's a piece actually we will be showing maybe in a few minutes. You brought the subject, so I have to talk about this piece. It's a bird. It's a Sunufu bird. It comes from Ivory Coast. It's big and it's all colored with painting. And when you look at that painting on the bird, it's very primitive. And when you look at Aboriginal art, those are the kind of painting and drawings you see in Australia, very much so. So there's so much similarities, and the symbols you see in that bird is the same symbols you see in Australia.
So that, I believe, shows the connectivity that we as black people have moved around this planet. Unfortunately, oftentimes we're not taught our true history, her story, here in America. But I think it's really important that we connect the dots, you know, not just only with the shop here, but being able to look back and start learning our own culture. And
yeah. Some art is what they call just the gatherings of pieces of wood, and then they start carving into this. But I noticed that, you know, you can see in the artwork that these are just mud cloth, for example, the wood that may be having a symbol in it. And people start carving, but a lot of this it predates what we consider to be modern art. That is, you know, using ceramics and plastics and other kinds of things. Can you speak to me about the original source of some of these masks, for example, some of these statues? How did they find these pieces?
Well, I'm going back to those symbolisms you were talking about, like there's a cross and X. You know, that's a sign language. Let me say, if you were living in a village and a group of people, if you want to let somebody know that I have gone ahead, of course, you will make an arrow that way, or I have already gone. So those are the first kind of communications which used in explaining something or something which has happened, so that when somebody comes after you, they know, oh, that has already happened. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But the art pieces you're talking about, these are communal or community pieces. It's almost like this is our first book ever written. Mm. And when people say Africans have never written a book, this is the best book. It will touch any human race because it talks a story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now the influence of some of this apparently pushes into Europe and Asia and other parts of the world. Are there other famous artists, sculptors that may be mimicking or taking the image from an African art piece, but are European or other parts of the world that we can see today?
I don't think you can find any new art which have never been made before. It's really a repetition of what already have happened, mm-hmm. but maybe there's a modification to it. Mm-hmm. When you look at the, I call them the famous or the master artist of the 20th century in the Western society, Europe and United States as well. I mean, it's already documented. You know, there's a book which is called Primitivism, which is written by the Museum of Modern Art of New York. In this book, you find these famous artists. They actually admired African art and they collected African art. And so you could see those art back to back, what they collected and what they made out of it. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at Picasso, the Cubism, that's mostly Congo, Central Africa, and East Africa. It's there. And you could see actually in this book, which I will suggest that for people who don't know, or for people who have collected very important African art and tribal, or maybe the contemporary art, you know, for $1 million from Picasso and everybody else. What they really don't understand that already existed prior to them doing it, but because they were so much inspired and there was something touched them so beautifully, they ended up prolonging that kind of art to the modern.
Yeah, advancing it forward, pushing it forward.
Yeah. And so many people sometimes get offended by it. I remember when I first opened my gallery, when they looked at pieces like this piece here, the Mbunda mask, the female, you could see why it's female because it's cubism, and the sun, which is like kind of smiling. They almost told us that, oh, the Africans copied Picasso. And I said, wow, how did this happen? I'm Tanzanian. I am primitive. And I'm not shy talking about I am primitive because I am. When you define primitive because it's simple, it's pure, and it's original, and I am. So I lived in a village. There was no electricity, there was no running water, and you couldn't find a newspaper, and there's no television. So if you have to tell me that I copied Picasso, or those people copied Picasso, it's just the vice versa. There's no way.
Now there is the part of the message that I'm feeling from the artwork is that there's a higher spirit or power or God or something. How does Africa look at the spirit, which results in the artwork that we have? But I'm just trying to figure out, we know Jesus and we know Moses, but here we're going and predating that in terms of how did the Africans look at the Great Spirit?
Well, that's a really good question. What's a spirit? A spirit is someone's soul. You have what we call now ancestor. When they die, they leave a spirit behind. So when you speak of spirit, it's not new at all. That's why I said the piece back there is almost like a DNA. When you die, given that I don't know in what kind of state you are dying. Sometimes you can die very peacefully. And so when you die very peacefully, your soul leaves the body. But the spirit of you still exists. The body goes away, but we believe that there's a spirit within you which is so real and which is so alive. And it's almost everywhere you go. I will give you an example. I lost my mother in 1987. I carry her spirit almost every single day because I know how to connect to that spirit. And so when you're talking about Jesus Christ, I have never seen Jesus Christ. I have never seen Abraham. And that the name Abraham, I know Makita, my father, my great-great-parents. Those are to me the spirits, to me, which are so real. Identifying myself to them is easier than identifying myself to Jesus Christ. Even though I believe in Jesus Christ, but I believe that there is beyond Jesus Christ in every tradition, in every tribe. That meaning, my tribe is Ngoni. We have had many ancestors, many chiefs, many healers, many spiritual people. Those are the spirits I'm talking about who we worship. And when Christianity came, there were a conflict of interest between our spiritual, our spirit, and the spirit they're talking about, Jesus Christ, Muhammad. Because to us, our ancestors and the spirits, our own great parents who have been living, and I could look at them, identify and connect with. And it makes much more sense to me because they speak my language. They spoke my language. They have more interest in me as a human because I come from them, and if they loved me enough and they loved my great-parents enough, they left their spirit and they wanted to make sure and they protected us so that our generation continues and so that we keep the values of whatever that and whatever they taught us. You see, that spirit lives in me and it lives in my child and it passed on. And that's what the spirit we're talking about. So I don't know why sometimes people don't understand the word spirit, whereas you came from your father, your mother, they gave you their spirit and the ancestors, it came, and that's what today it's called DNA, and through that we worship them. Yes. Because they gave us life.
But today we have the conflicts of just street life development here. I mean, I was going to ask you, when you hear this about love, about family, and about these spirits that are pushing forward the next generation, what thoughts come to your mind?
Is how we as Africans born within the Americas and having lived in another country for 15 years and have connected with other Africans from other parts of the world that were not born within the Americas. We've lost, as Sister Twiga was saying, a lot of, in my opinion, the connectivity of that origin of the ancestors be from a Eurocentric perspective. And not to take away from that, but we have to be very inclusive as a people to reconnect our soul, our history, her story, and understanding that. And I feel that definitely here in the Americas, because I know for a fact in Australia, the Koris, they still worship their God per se, or that energy or that spirit. All native people do. And I believe here we've lost a bit of that, and it's really important for us not to shun away, because how we've been taught and what we've been taught from another tribe or Europeans have been that Africa and its spirituality and its ritual beliefs has always been taboo of some nature. And I think once we start to reconnect, as John Henry Clark would say, reconnect back home from a spiritual perspective as opposed from a psychological. And one of the things that we have to also be mindful is that Kemet, or Africa, we always had an inclusive. You didn't separate the culture, the psychology, the philosophy, and the spirituality and the religion. Here within the Americas, it's all one.
Yeah.
Whereas and from a Eurocentric perspective, if it cannot be quantified and or measured, then it's non-believable. So we have to get back, I say.
First of all, once you incorporate all of this in one, it makes you a better person. It makes you recognize, respect, and honor other person next to you. It gives that equality, respect of hierarchy. You know, you are such an important human of all, and unless you acknowledge that, I don't know how you can really value yourself, because then you become absolutely empty soul without acknowledging yourself, the value, respecting. It's hard for me to really separate, because if I don't honor myself, if I don't respect myself enough, if I don't have that kind of spirituality, I think it'd be very easy for me to go and attack whoever without feeling, because African culture and the art is very inclusive. Once you know that's the beginning, the first, it's a human race. And it doesn't matter. And once you acknowledge that, it'd be very hard for any human being to deny any other human.
Well, I agree with you.
And that's
there.
it.
And I agree. And from an African having been taught here within the Americas, our system has always taught us Africa is a wretched continent, that we had no soul, that we had no history. And then
actually, you have more soul than any other. You know, you have more soul than, and I think that sometimes it's taking place because it tears you apart. Once they know that you're torn, you don't have that basics, you're empty. It's easy not to care for yourself. It's easy not to care for any other person. It's easy to let yourself go because you've been scraped out. Your pride is gone, you know?
Things about the artwork is that it's a memory. It gives us a connection that we're talking about. So
Exactly.
the reason that people, I think, purchase art, why would you say people purchase art? Is it for the memory, for the history? Because what's happening here is that we're trying to get to the food, clothing, and shelter, trying to, you know, deal with your ego and everything else. But when you spiral up, when you ratchet up to the highest aesthetics, that's where art is.
Well, because I don't care. I know if I had any money at all to invest in, I would invest in something which is meaningful. You know, art has emotions, and the emotion is it's so alive and it's so truthful to what we go through every single day. And so if you don't look at, when you look at that piece over there, and if you don't see the emotions of a human, if you don't relate to that, because we all go through that emotion of different kind of every single day, but on how you deal with that emotion, you can choose to pick up some material or do something which makes you happy, but that's temporary. In order to deal with your own self, that's why real emotion of art will bring you to the truthful self.
Wow, that's beautiful. I remember the Sankofa, which is your name. It was the bird looking back but walking forward. Are you familiar with that symbol, Sankofa?
No.
Okay.
Well, it's the bird that looks back and it has an egg in its mouth, which is fertility, but you have to look back at your past in order to move forward.
That's so cool.
And what happens is we oftentimes look forward and don't want to look back
Because
oftentimes that past hurts.
It's too painful.
It's too painful. And I think as African people, and I'm a proud African who happen to have been born here within the Americas, we have to appreciate the culture. We have to appreciate the history. But we have to tell our story first, because when anyone tells our story for us, they're not going to give us the true history, her story about whom we are. We have a rich culture. We have a great culture. And we can be inclusive in that world because the world came out of us, came out of Africa. And that's not being told. So your art, our culture, life, the ancestry is all connected together.
Yes.
We must, I
Yeah.
believe that.
But more so, you will see the different kind of emotion you're talking about. There's very real kind of sadness in some of the art. There's happiness in some of the art. There's worshiping in some of the art. And so these are the true emotions of us daily. So unless you are willing to deal with that kind of emotion to become better self, otherwise, it's an avoidance, but that still plays in your mind over and over. And unless you deal with the reality, yes, you can cry, you can do whatever, but let it go. And then you open up the new door.
I think that's one of the hardest things, that we're not willing to let it go and recognize. I think oftentimes we are in denial and we suppress that pain. With, as you were saying, the art has a lot of emotions in it. There's various different emotions, and I believe once again, once we're able to dig deep, if one could say, and not be in denial about whom we are and the greatness of where we came from, then we can really get past a lot of these things.
There's a piece back there. I think when we get a chance, we can look at that. It has a different kind of spirit coming out of a different. It's kind of cuckoo, just like animated, you know. We all have that kind of devilish in us. We all have that kind of anxiety in us, and that's why I'm saying that once, if you have owned that piece, which tells that story, it's the truthful thing. And it's easy to deal with yourself, because when you look at yourself, when you hear these voices going on in your mind, you can look at that piece and say, oh, it has always been. And so what am I supposed to do? You have to calm down, listen. It's a teaching from this piece of art. It allows you to come back to realization and deal with it and move forward. We all have different animation in us, and sometimes it comes differently, but on how we deal with those things.
Yeah. I want to ask a question. During the Renaissance, the Black Renaissance, which started in New York in the early 1900s, one of the poets, Paul Laurence Dunbar, wrote a poem about "We Wear the Mask."
That's funny.
Yeah, that grins. Yeah, but it grins and it lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This price we pay to human guile, with myriad subtleties in our face. So I'm noticing that we have a number of masks. Talk to me about
this is because
the
you have
mask.
really touched a very important subject. Before, I had a show of women, all female energy. And then after that, I had this show I called, it was just masks. And my invitation said, come and join me, help to identify myself through masks, because we are all walking masks. And so that's really, because we just put this persona kind of, we hide something underneath, but then we put that face, cute and smiling, that's all walking mask. And so these masks are representation of us. There's something behind that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question because we've had to wear the mask.
It's
Talk to me.
interesting that you mentioned that, because I also, as a poet, have written a piece. I never locked it in, but it's called The Mask. And you're right, we wear this mask. I mean, we want to be accepted, and we want to be loved by society. So we'll put on the representative
of
the
that
mask. oftentimes, and what I've started to learn for myself, because you have to work on self first, is to be true to myself, to be real with myself, to peel away the layers and layers of the lies that society has placed on me, whereas I don't any longer have to wear that mask. And oftentimes what happens is we're afraid to remove it because the true self will then show.
Yeah, okay, the line that Paul Laurence Dunbar says is that, we, with torn and bleeding hearts, we sigh, but we wear the mask. So you show up smiling, but behind that mask is the torn and the bleeding hearts because of what people perceive you to be.
You see, I like the subject and the topic of masks. And God is wonderful God.
Yes.
Because if God was able to unmask us and see the reality behind the mask, most of us will not be sitting together, standing next to one another. And so even though sometimes the mask is bad or good or protecting or covering, it's one of the major, most important thing God have ever created, because there's so many devilish, evilish act. And when you sit next to somebody smiling at you, but if you knew that underneath that human, they don't want you to be there. They would rather see you disappear. And that mask speaks volume because without it, I cannot even imagine. I really can't.
Well, I was going to ask, are there things in your shop here that are used in Africa more than just as an art piece, but are used in ceremonies?
99% of them are used in ceremonies, because without art, like our President Nyerere, who founded Tanzania, who gave us the independence, Julius Nyerere, he was one of the important men in our country. I don't think we'll ever find somebody like that. And he was asked to give a quote. There was a German pharaoh when they did an exhibit of Makonde art in Germany. And so they just asked him to offer one phrase about what he think what art is about, and he said, without art, we are empty.
Empty.
Our society, we will be nothing without the art, because once you're born, there's an art piece signifies that birth of a child. And then through passages, when you become of age, there's a piece which I will show, the ceremony, you are taught as a man and the changes, and the woman is taught about the changes with the body and your importance. Now you're entering a different phase. Child is no longer. And then you come back where you have taught about your own body change, sexuality, your new role is important, you're a grown, matured man, and you enter with this kind of very distinctive role to play as a man.
Sort of like a rites of passage.
Absolutely. And so when these masks are used to signify that, once you cross that, you can never, because first of all, you carry your whole family, and then you carry the tribe, and you're going to be a father, and then a father with children responsibility. But then you have a very strong and important role to play in a society as a man. And if you would, I think if all the young people would be given that, because not only you living that childhood, you're becoming a man, but then you have this group of people with you, which we don't have in the United States. It's like a brotherhood, which is so real, and many people sometimes go find these groups to identify themselves with, and the negative groups. But if you have such a responsibility of a man with his family, and you are an important self in the society with the brotherhood around it, you will never go and do anything negative, because you carry yourself, your family, and your tribe, and the society.
That's so powerful that you say that, because I work with children or young adults, and oftentimes, definitely here within the Americas, unfortunately, the young generation, between the ages of, I think it's 18 and 25, 1 in every 2 young black males are incarcerated. But there has been a system, and we speak about the rites of passage, that has been stolen or taken away, particularly for young black males here within the Americas. And when we have that rites of passage, when we doesn't have that positive male role model.
Well, because you have lost your identity. You're looking, you know, that's the identity of your own self is lost. And so when you're looking around, when you're looking for identity, there's not a real identity of you to be, and that's why you see things are negative.
But we also, which is very important, that there's a cause and there's an effect. Oftentimes we are dealing with the effect. We don't know the cause of that identity being taken away, and the world doesn't know the cause, and it has been pointing fingers and blaming the victims oftentimes. And I say that it is very important that we understand what we're dealing with here in the West, and the beauty of whom we are in connecting back to Africa that was stolen from us, that history.
Okay.
May I come in? Because when the slaves were taken from West Africa, you were stripped out. You couldn't take any piece of art. You couldn't take any ownership of anything. And I remember I read somewhere in the newspaper, because women, African women, always like to wear lingeries, and our lingeries wear beads because it's sexual. And I remember only one slave managed to come out with those green beads, and that's all what she had. That means not only you have stripped of your culture, everything, your music, your art, and you just like a ghost looking, who am I? You have nothing. You have no ownership. You have no friends. Your family is torn. You cannot, I mean, maybe you met another slave who looked like you, but you didn't know who that man was. And so that's what happened. And so, and I think for many, I'm just saying it from the outside point of view. I can never imagine myself being a slave during that time, because I don't know what could have happened to me, because I still have my full pride as a human being. But if I was taken out like that and then just forced to be with somebody and work for somebody without any belonging, without any family, without this, I don't know what else I could have been.
Yeah, and see, and this is probably where, in terms of the arts, the blues came from, gospel, now even R&B and hip hop and locking and all the other art forms have come as a result of not knowing that identity.
That's why I believe it is so important to identify your face to the African face mask.
Yes.
Because you are.
Yes.
You're part of that. And so the problem is that when this art, I think when it was introduced to the Western society, some of them were used in the movies in a very different way. Yes. They talked about a different language, where a black person, when they saw that piece, they just went voodoo or something, cannibalism, or they ate people. And so when these pieces introduced to African American that way, no wonder why some of them resent and they look at it negative, because it plays with your mind. Oh, that's voodoo, oh, that's kush, that whatever that is, and that has taken that pride of that human away, because they don't want to be that. I don't want to be this and that, and so there's a reason to that.
Yeah, and that's a very powerful thing of what you just said, and haven't put together, of course, in Sydney, because I lived there, mind you, for 15 years. I've been back here now about 14 years. The history, how we as Africans born in America have been taught about the motherland, about our culture, that it was wretched, that it was negative. All the images of what you see today and have always, when I was growing up, have always been negative, that it's a wretched continent, that is flies, famine, and disease, and jungles, you know, Tarzan movies and things of that nature. And so that has taken the Africans here in America, I would say, not wanting to connect to Africa. But there's another flip side of that as well. the Africans that have been born in Africa have been taught these negative things about Africans born within the Americas. Yes. So what we have is a Willie Lynch sort of ideology, is that
divide and conquer.
One against the other. One says he's better than the other because he doesn't have his or her true names, which is a problem. You cannot take Africa away from me, because when you look at these big lips, when you look at this nose, when you look at this paint job, what do you see? You see black African, which connects me automatically to my homeland. What we have to understand is we have to connect.
And go back home, too.
And go back home. And we be accepted, and first we have to accept who we are. Our African brothers and sisters at home have to acknowledge who we are. And once we have this bridging, because there needs to be a bridging, in my opinion, that we have to understand how powerful we are as a people. And the world knows this, and once we are able to start to reconnect with the black people, or African descent people on the planet, and all cultures, because I'm not just only interested in connecting with Africans born within the Americas or Africans, I'm interested in connecting with people. And once we are able to connect from a soulful perspective, I think we can get past a lot of the lies and untruths.
I want to ask you a question about the types of materials that are put together. I just want to throw some things out. Ivory, gold, stones of different types. I mean, these are all natural to your homeland?
They're all natural to our, Africa is very rich in natural resources. We have had gold, diamond, agate, amazonite, carnelian, amber, seeds, and stones. Like the first jewelry ever made, it was carved of stones and the woods or seeds. People wore that. But they're natural to Africa, but the African themselves have never really benefited from. But sometimes we have beads like glass. This came through trade. So, and some of them came during the slavery. The European came, brought some beads and bought some ivory in exchange. They brought beads and came back with oil. They came back with gold. They came back with diamonds. And we were left out to paint like this because we had to dress up and we liked colors. So it's been kind of a robbery a little bit. But when you look at what's really most valuable of Africa to the African people, I don't think Africa have benefited yet.
Right. I was going to ask you about the instruments, which are also an art form. Things like the gourd, things like the drum, the balafone. I mean, just different things. So the art continues beyond the mask, where we hear the sounds. Can you speak to me about that?
Because music is very universal. Music, it will take you to a different place. And music is also a call. It will touch you and it will connect you with the spirits. Because this is how we call our ancestors, through drums, using drums, and through singing. So when our spiritual people make these masks, when we do our ceremonies, there will always be drums, there will be always be music, there will be always these gods you were talking about, because the communication of the music, that's what takes people to a different place in your mind, and that's what you can actually relax and connect yourself with the spirit. That's the dance. Sometimes you could see people losing it. They're completely, the music and the dance take them to a completely different place where they don't know where they are. And based on that, sometimes you find somebody possessed with a spirit and speaking with tongues because of that music, the calling of the spirit through the drums. So this is how these pieces, sometimes they were empowered, because through music and everything, somebody was able to call upon the spirit and put that spirit power in the piece like that, which is so alive till today.
Wow. So you've actually connected some very important dots for us, at least me as an African American, not understanding. I mean, I understand the gorge and I understand the music, I understand the arts, the performing arts. We wear the mask. I'm a thespian. But what you've done is you've connected it with more clarity, that a lot of this is connected to the human spirit, which knows no color. It's the DNA, the humanity of mankind and humankind, that we are all brothers and sisters in one way or another, but we deny that.
Actually, this is really funny because during Christianity, during Islam, that's one of the other very important things were taken away from Africans, the music. And because the way we dance, it was so powerful, it would transcend a person and be able to communicate with our spirit. And so they took it away. And the very important dance, like the sexual movement, like we see now Beyonce dancing and accepted, they took that away from us. Once you are transformed to Christianity, you were not supposed to dance that way. You were much more stricted because that dance what made us who we were spiritually.
And it also pushed the envelope forward for the next generations to continue to come.
It not only did that, it killed our cultures because once you are transformed to Christianity, you feel shy moving freely. You feel shy singing openly. But if you were in a village, I would not be amused to hear somebody sing loudly because people feel the beauty, they can relate and appreciate that. Only in the Western society, when sometimes you sing, you become destructive to others. But for us, that music and singing, it's life. And it's supposed to be free and appreciated and shared.
I feel like the colors of the fabrics and some of the artifacts here plays a very important role. So here we have music, we have arts, but we have the colors. I mean, what colors resonate with you?
I grew up wearing very colorful, bright colors like that because my mother made everything for us since we were little. She designed everything from underwear, bedspreads, you name it. And so you become really open, colorful, and happy because there are certain colors you look at it, it's happy, like yellow is happy, pink, it's love, pink and orange and red, they always bring love.
Those are universal.
They're very universal. And then when you look at the green, for us in Tanzania, that's like a nature. We're always surrounded by green. And when you're looking at also yellow, this is our minerals. Minerals, underneath that yellow. And so black is for people. So those are colors you cannot live without. And that's so important because once you are putting yourself like in black only, it becomes sad sometimes. Your mood becomes heavy. But then when you bring color, you become alive.
Well, President Obama yesterday was addressing a very serious issue, but he had on a tan suit. So he caught the ire of the Republican Party. How dare you dress that way? He was dressed in a suit and a tie, but it was a light color, but it was a very dark subject that he was addressing. I think it may have been the ISIS people dealing with Russia, dealing with the world in terms of it going up and down and over and out with bombs and boots on the ground and everything. So color does play a significant role.
It's very important because it's important for the soul. Yes. It's important for their eyes and important for thinking and emotion.
That's right.
There's so much emotion in colors. And that's why we colored people are always emotional, automatically.
But we wear those colors very well.
Black people are always very expressive. They're always happy unless something happened but normally we're wild people. It's just who we are. We're open and you allow the animation out of you become alive. And it's only human.
Yes. Yes.
Beautiful. Well, I want to thank both of you for sharing just some wonderful stuff, and particularly the artwork and how all of that ties everything.
But I also wanted to mention about the beads, the meaning of the beads. Okay. You know, in my collection here, we have beads from BC, the glass beads, and then we have amber. All these beads have different meaning. Like the beads I have on, these are called moon glass. This is only Yoruba priests utilize them. They have the energy and the ability to heal, to pure and cleanse. When you seek, people think you can become, you can be healed. So as amber, and when you're working with carnelian have a very good energy, which is, it grounds you a little bit. And when you're looking at amber, even Muslims play with amber because it's a healing stone. And then when you're talking about Roman eye beads, which are glass, those come from BC. When a child was born, they were given one. It has eyes, which is blue or green, because they believe people with blue and green eyes have the ability or more capable of throwing evil to others. So they made that bead to bounce back that, to throw back that evil, to protect. So this is like Middle East, Mali, they made that beads with blue and green eye to reflect that energy of the blue and green eye, which is, to them it was evil. So beads have played so much importance in our lives because when people wear these beads, since that times, they carry the emotions and it passed on in these beads. And so when people wear these old beads, actually you can feel. The other day I had a man looked at a necklace which has a mixture of Islamic beads and Roman eye beads. It was a man, and he said, wow, it feels warm. I feel the energy without saying anything. And I said, that's why they are, and you are carrying the emotions of people who believe that those pieces have the ability, and without saying anything, this man felt it.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think one piece that needs to come into the art world is the what we call aromatherapy, you know, the smells. I noticed when I went to Africa, it smelled different. I said, wow, I know this. It's like my DNA had got awakened. I knew this smell, and I had never been to Senegal before, and I was sitting there. And but what role does smell take in a lot of these things? Are there incense, things like that, things that you burn, oils, things like that?
There's a lot of herbs, medicine. There's honey sometimes. There's animal like oils or skins, because to make any piece of art alive, you need a life. Wow. And so that life, that's what makes these pieces alive. And so when we speak of ancestor pieces, which we have many, it doesn't represent an ancestor. It is a real ancestor because that energy came from an animal which is alive, honey from the bees, and herbs, which is medicine. With the help of this medicine or spiritual person, have been able to give that piece power and life. So that's the difference and the beauty of it.
Incredible.
Yeah. Thank you.
Incredible.
Well, I want to thank you both, Kinara Sankofa, and Twiga Mbunda. And that's the Mbunga.
That's Mbunda Mas. That's my family, my ancestor, because, yeah, I'm very proud of it.
Yes, you should be. Well, thank you for coming on the show today, and thank you also.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, and thanks for the art. It is speechless.
And thank you to the audience that will be watching.
And we are here on 3333 Sacramento Street, which is Pacific Heights, San Francisco. So if they wanted to see our art, our jewelry and everything, we are here to educate people and from the African point of view. Thank you. And we have our gallery address is 3333 Sacramento Street. Email address is twigambunda@gmail.com, and we have a website which is twigagallery.com. Thank you.
Continued blessings and good evening.